The abandoned warehouse crouched in shadow, its rusted metal walls absorbing the city's neon glow like a beast swallowing light. Tae-Hyun-woo stood in the center of the cavernous space, his black tactical gear blending with the darkness. 50 feet above, exposed steel beams crisscrossed like a skeletal cage. Around him, his men moved like ghosts. 15 soldiers of the Tae Syndicate, each one a weapon hunged by years of blood. He checked his watch. Third time in 5 minutes. The most feared man in Seoul's underworld, the wolf who'd built an empire on the corpses of his enemies, who'd survived 3 assassination attempts before his 25th birthday, whose name made politicians and police chiefs alike reach for their wallets, was waiting for her, Bracy William, the curvy black woman who'd walked into his penthouse 6 months ago with nothing but attitude and a death wish. The woman who'd looked at his world of violence and said, "Shh, let me see how big it is," like she was admiring architecture instead of a criminal empire. The woman who'd somehow become the weakness he swore he'd never have again. His jaw clenched. That fact made him want to put his fist through concrete. Footsteps echoed. Hyun-woo's hand moved to the Glock at his hip, then relaxed. He knew that walk, confident, unhurried, like she owned every space she entered. Bracy emerged from the side entrance, her leather jacket catching the dim overhead lights, curves moving with purpose. Her natural hair was pulled back tight, revealing the sharp angles of her face. Dark eyes scanned the warehouse with the analytical precision she'd developed working in his world. She didn't see him at first, too busy examining the layout, counting his men, noting exit points. Smart woman, his woman. Then her gaze found him in the shadows, and the air between them crackled, that same electricity that had been there since day one, since she'd boldly walked into his private club and refused to be intimidated, since she'd stood in his penthouse and challenged everything he thought he knew about control. She stopped 10 feet away. "You called, I came. Now tell me why we're playing soldier in a warehouse instead of sleeping." Direct, no fear. God, he'd missed that voice during the 4 hours she'd been across town setting up the decoy operation. Hyun-woo stepped forward, the weak light finally catching his features. Sharp cheekbones, the scar cutting through his left eyebrow, gift from the Yakuza 3 years back. Eyes like black ice that could freeze a man's heart mid-beat. Deegan's crew traced your location. His voice was gravel and silk. They're coming, tonight. 30 men, maybe more. Most women would have flinched. Bracy just tilted her head, processing. So we're not running. No. He moved closer, into her space, that predatory grace that made people forget to breathe. We're ending this, right here, right now. No more threats, no more watching over our shoulders. His hand lifted, fingers grazing her jaw. "No more putting you in danger because of me." She caught his wrist, held it. Her grip was firm, steady. "Then let's make sure they regret ever thinking I was your weakness." In the distance, engines rumbled. The enemy was approaching. Hyun-woo's lips curved into something savage. "That's my girl." Hello, Love Intention family. Before we continue, drop a comment telling me, when someone threatens what you love, do you run or do you stand and fight? Let me know below, and don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe, because this story is about to get intense. Now let's go back. The warehouse stretched before them like a concrete cathedral to violence. Bracy walked the perimeter with Hyun-woo's second-in-command, Ye-jun, a wiry man with a boxer's nose and sniper's eyes. Unlike the others, Ye-jun had never looked at her like she was decoration or distraction. He'd trained her himself over the past 3 months, teaching her to shoot, to fight, to think like a soldier instead of a survivor. "Upper catwalks," Bracy said, pointing. "That's where I'd position shooters if I were attacking. Gives high ground advantage, clear sight lines to the main floor." Ye-jun nodded, impressed. Exactly what the boss said you'd suggest. She ignored the flutter in her chest at that. 6 months ago, she'd been running from an abusive ex in Chicago, broke and desperate, when she'd stumbled into Hyun-woo's world. Back then, she thought survival meant disappearing. Now, Now she understood that sometimes survival meant standing visible, armed, and ready. Hyun Woo approached, his tactical vest loaded with magazines and a combat knife strapped to his thigh. In this mode, war mode, he was beautiful and terrifying. Bracy walked me through it again. They'd spent 4 hours planning. They'd learned that about him. Meticulous, strategic, leaving nothing to chance. It's why he'd survived when others hadn't. Dagon's crew will breach from the east entrance, she began, moving to the makeshift table covered in blueprints and weapon manifests. They always hit hardest where they think we're weakest. We let them think we're concentrated here, she tapped the main floor, but actually we'll have teams positioned in 3 locations. Her finger traced routes. Team Alpha on the catwalks, like I said. Team Bravo behind these shipping containers on the west side. Team Charlie, that's us, positioned near the north exit, hidden behind the false wall you had your guys build this afternoon. Hyun Woo studied her, and she felt the weight of his attention like physical touch. And when they're fully committed to the main floor, we collapse the trap. She met his eyes, those dark pools that had seen too much death and somehow still looked at her like she was salvation. Alpha hits from above, Bravo from the side, Charlie cuts off their retreat. Classic pincer movement. They'll be so focused on the front they won't see us coming from 3 directions until it's too late. Yejun whistled low. Woman knows her tactics. Woman grew up in Inglewood, Bracy corrected. You learn to think 3 moves ahead when gangs control your block. She'd never told them the full story. How her ex, Vernon, had been connected to the Vice Lords. How he'd used those connections to terrorize her. How she'd fled Chicago with nothing because staying meant dying. But they knew enough. Knew that her past had carved her sharp, made her practical about violence in ways most civilians never understood. Hyun Woo's hand settled on her lower back, proprietary and grounding. If anything goes wrong, it won't. She turned, placing her palm flat against his chest, feeling his heartbeat through the vest. We've got this. You've got an army. I've got a brain. They've got arrogance. We win. His jaw worked. She knew what he wasn't saying. That he'd burn soul to ash if she got hurt, that he'd already lost people he cared about to this life, that loving her was the most dangerous thing he'd ever done. Hyun Woo, she waited until his eyes locked on hers. I'm not her. I'm not Yuna. I'm not going to betray you, and I'm not going to break. Something flickered in his expression, pain, old and scarred over. His ex-fiancée, Yuna, had been a spy, planted by a rival family. She'd fed them information for 2 years, nearly got him killed at their own engagement party. The betrayal had turned him into granite, made him trust no one, until Bracy had walked in and somehow slipped past every wall. I know, he said quietly, and she believed he meant it. Boss? One of his men jogged over. Tae-young, 23 and baby-faced, despite the assault rifle slung across his back. Scouts report movement, 10 minutes out, maybe less. The energy in the warehouse shifted instantly. 15 men transformed from waiting soldiers to hunting predators. Weapons were checked, positions verified. Bracy felt her own adrenaline spike, sharp and clarifying. Hyun Woo's hand cupped her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone. For a moment, the ruthless crime lord disappeared, and she saw the man underneath, the one who brought her coffee exactly how she liked it, who'd tracked down her estranged sister and paid her medical bills without asking for credit, who'd held her through nightmares about Vernon. You stay close to me, he said. Always. Always, she agreed. Then the moment broke. He turned to his men, voice carrying authority that demanded obedience. Positions, comms check. Nobody fires until I give the order. We let them commit fully before we spring the trap. Bracy followed him to the north position, behind the false wall that looked like stacked crates, but was actually reinforced steel plating with built-in firing ports. Through the narrow gaps, she had a clear view of the main floor. Empty, lit by 3 overhead lamps that cast pools of weak yellow light. It looked abandoned, vulnerable, perfect bait. 3 minutes, Yejun's voice crackled through the earpiece Hyun Woo had given her. Eyes sharp, Bracey's hand found the Glock holstered at her hip. Hyun-woo had trained her himself on this particular weapon, spending hours at his private range until she could draw and fire in under 2 seconds, until she could hit center mass at 20 yards without thinking. Scared? He murmured beside her, close enough that his breath warmed her ear. She considered the question honestly. 6 months ago, she would have been terrified, would have been the woman who froze when Vernon raised his fist, who apologized for his violence, who believed herself small. That woman was dead. "No," she said. "I'm ready to watch you work." His laugh was dark and satisfied. "Then watch closely, baby, because tonight they learn what happens when they threaten what's mine." Outside, engines cut off. Car doors opened and closed. Voices carried through the warehouse's broken windows. Korean, fast and aggressive. Daegun's crew, exactly on schedule. Bracey's pulse thrummed steady. Beside her, Hyun-woo was perfectly still, a coiled spring waiting to release. On the catwalks above, Alpha Team became shadows. Across the floor, Bravo Team's breathing slowed to nothing. The east entrance exploded inward, not a breach, a demolition. Twisted metal screeched, dust bloomed, and through the smoke came 30 men armed with everything from pistols to shotguns, led by Daegun himself. Bracey recognized him from the intelligence photos. Tall, scarred, with the dead eyes of a career killer. He'd been Hyun-woo's rival for 5 years, constantly testing boundaries, pushing into Tae Syndicate territory. 3 months ago, he'd sent a team to ambush one of their supply runs. 2 of Hyun-woo's men had died. This was about more than territory. This was about pride, power, the kind of grudge that only ended in blood. "Tae," Daegun's voice boomed through the warehouse. "I know you're here, hiding like a rat while your pet American whore watches from safety." Bracey felt Hyun-woo tense beside her. She touched his arm, steadying. "Don't take the bait. Come out and die like a man." Daegun continued, his crew fanning out across the main floor, exactly as predicted, committing to the center, focusing on the exits, ignoring the shadows above and beside them. Amateurs, Bracey thought with grim satisfaction. Loud, aggressive, confident. They'd already made their fatal mistake. Hyun-woo lifted his hand, made a subtle gesture. On the catwalks, Alpha Team shifted, rifles finding targets. Behind the containers, Bravo Team's safeties clicked off. "Wait," Bracey whispered. "Let them get deeper. Another 30 seconds." He glanced at her, surprised. "Trust me," she said. So he waited. Let Daegun's crew spread further into the trap. Let them grow bolder. Let them think they'd walked into an empty building. "Tae's already dead," one of Daegun's lieutenants laughed. "Probably ran to—" "Now," Bracey said. Hyun-woo's hand dropped. The warehouse erupted into thunder and lightning. Alpha Team's suppressed rifles spat from above. 3-round bursts that dropped Daegun's men before they could even process where the shots came from. Bravo Team surged from behind the containers, close-range devastation that turned the left flank into chaos. And from the north, behind the false wall, Hyun-woo's final team, including him and Bracey, stepped into view. The pincer snapped shut. Daegun's crew scrambled, tried to return fire, but they were caught in a kill box, surrounded on 3 sides with nowhere to run. The east entrance they'd demolished was now blocked by their own fallen men and twisted metal. The south exit was a dead end. The west was controlled by Bravo Team. "Drop your weapons," Yejun's voice boomed. "You're surrounded." Some obeyed immediately, hands up, faces pale. Smart ones who understood the math. Others tried to fight, loyalty or stupidity or both. They died for it, cut down by Alpha Team's precision. In 90 seconds, it was over. 30 men reduced to 12 conscious survivors, hands on their heads, kneeling in pools of emergency lighting and their own fear. 8 dead. 10 wounded and crawling, the smell of cordite thick enough to taste, and at the center of it all, Daegun stood alone, gun still in hand but lowered, staring at Hyun-woo with something between rage and respect. "You brought her," he said, nodding toward Bracey. "That was her plan, wasn't it? The trap." Hyun-woo stepped forward, Bracey at his side exactly as they'd practiced, equal, partners. She's smarter than your entire crew combined, Hyunwoo said. You made the mistake of thinking she was my weakness. She's my strength. Bracy felt the words settle into her bones like armor. Daegun's laugh was bitter. Then I've already lost. He dropped his gun, kicked it away. Do it quick. But Hyunwoo shook his head. You're going to leave Seoul tonight. Take whoever's left and disappear. Because if I see you again, if I even hear your name in this city, his voice dropped to something sub-zero, I won't just kill you. I'll erase every trace that you ever existed. The threat hung in the air, absolute. Daegun met his eyes for a long moment, then nodded. You've changed, Tae. Softer. No, Bracy said, speaking for the first time. Every eye in the warehouse turned to her. He's not softer, he's scarier, because now he has something worth protecting, which means he'll go further than you ever imagined to keep it safe. Silence. Then Daegun laughed, genuine, exhausted. She's right. You win, Tae. Seoul's yours. Within minutes, Daegun's survivors were gone, dragging their wounded toward whatever vehicles they had left. Hyunwoo's men secured the warehouse, checking bodies, collecting weapons, erasing evidence. Bracy stood in the center of the empty floor, breathing hard, alive, victorious. Hyunwoo approached from behind, arms sliding around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. You did it, he murmured into her hair. You brilliant, terrifying woman. You did it. She turned in his arms, looked up at that face she'd learned to love, sharp and scarred, and hers. We did it. His kiss was fierce, claiming, full of everything words couldn't say. When they broke apart, she was smiling. So, you said something about me seeing how big your world is? I think I finally understand. And I'm not scared. Not of your world, not of anything. She pressed her hand over his heart. Because wherever you are, that's where I belong. In the distance, sirens wailed. Police who'd been paid to arrive late to find nothing but an empty warehouse and shell casings they'd mysteriously lose. The Tae Syndicate's reach extended everywhere, invisible fingers in every pocket. But for now, in this moment, it was just them. Two people who'd found each other in darkness and chosen to stand together in the light. Come on, Hyunwoo said, lacing his fingers through hers. Let's go home. They walked out together, leaving the battlefield behind, stepping into Seoul's neon-bright midnight like they owned it. Because they did. The penthouse was silent when they returned at 2 a.m. 60 floors above Seoul, the city sprawled like a circuit board, all light and life, unaware that a war had been fought and won in its shadows. Bracy stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows while Hyunwoo poured whiskey. Japanese, older than both of them combined. She was still wearing her tactical gear, still processing the fact that she'd helped orchestrate an ambush that left 8 men dead and 30 more running scared. 6 months ago, she'd been serving drinks in a Chicago dive bar, hiding tips in her shoe because Vernon checked her pockets, flinching at raised voices, making herself small. Now she'd helped take down a rival syndicate. The transformation should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like finally becoming who she'd always been underneath the fear. The girl from Inglewood who'd learned to read streets and people, who'd survived by being 3 steps ahead, who'd protected her little sister from her mother's boyfriends using nothing but wit and willpower. You're thinking too loud, Hyunwoo said, appearing beside her with 2 glasses. She accepted hers, let the whiskey burn its way down. Just wondering if this makes me a bad person. Does it feel like it does? Bracy considered. No, those men came to kill us. We defended ourselves. They made a choice, we made a better one. And the fact that I'm a criminal, that everything I own, everything we just protected came from illegal enterprises? She turned to face him fully. This was a conversation they danced around for months. The morality of his world, her presence in it, what it meant about who she was becoming. Vernon was a legitimate businessman on paper, she said slowly, owned a construction company, paid his taxes, smiled at his neighbors. He also beat me unconscious 3 times, strangled me twice, and told me he'd kill my sister if I ever left. She met Hyun-woo's eyes. "You run drugs and guns and protection rackets. You've killed people, but you've never lied to me about what you are. You've never raised your hand to me. And when I told you about Vernon, you had him disappeared from Chicago so thoroughly that the police think he moved to Canada." His expression was unreadable. "That doesn't make it right." "No, I agreed, but it makes it honest. And in my life, I'll take a dangerous, honest man over a safe liar any day." The words settled between them like a vow. Hyun-woo's fingers traced her jawline, feather light. "You're not supposed to be okay with this, with me. Then I guess we're both breaking the rules." She leaned into his touch. "You weren't supposed to fall for your housekeeper. I wasn't supposed to fall for my boss. But here we are. Here we are," he echoed, and kissed her like she was oxygen. They made love in his bed, their bed now, really, with the city lights painting shadows across bare skin, slow and intense and necessary. Afterwards, Bracy lay against his chest, tracing the tattoos that covered his torso. Each one told a story. The tiger on his ribs from his first kill at 19, the geometric patterns hiding bullet scars, the Korean characters across his heart that spelled his mother's name. "Tell me about her," Bracy said softly. "Your mother." His body tensed. This was dangerous territory. Hyun-woo shared his present freely, but guarded his past like classified intel. But then he spoke. "She was a seamstress, worked 16-hour days in a factory in Dongdaemun, sewing clothes for companies that paid her nothing." His voice was rough, distant. "My father was a gambling addict who beat her when he lost, which was often. He died when I was 7. Liver failure from drinking. She died when I was 15, pneumonia, because she couldn't afford medicine." Bracy's hand stilled on his chest. "I joined the Tay Syndicate that same month," he continued. "The original Tay, old man who ran half of Seoul back then, he saw something in me, trained me, made me his heir. I built everything I have on her memory, on the promise that I'd never be powerless again, that I'd never watch someone I love suffer while I did nothing." She understood now why he'd responded to her situation with Vernon so viciously, why he protected her with such intensity, why the idea of her being threatened made him feral. "She would have liked you," Bracy said quietly. "Your mother. She would have loved you." He pressed his lips to her forehead. "Would have said you have a spine made of steel and a heart made of gold." Would have been right. They drifted toward sleep like that, tangled together, safe in their fortress above the city. But at 4:47 a.m., Bracy woke to Hyun-woo pacing the bedroom, phone pressed to his ears, speaking rapid Korean. She caught enough to understand. Something about the harbor, customs, a shipment. When he hung up, his expression was dark. "Problem?" she asked. "Daegun didn't leave Seoul." Hyun-woo's voice was ice. "He went straight to the harbor and tried to hijack our shipment coming in from Busan. Customs caught it on camera. 15 million in electronics, pharmaceuticals, and cash, almost stolen." Bracy sat up, suddenly wide awake. "But you said if he stayed in Seoul." "I know what I said." His hand clenched around the phone hard enough to make it creak. "Now I have to make good on the threat." She saw the war in his expression. The ruthless syndicate boss who couldn't show weakness versus the man who just fought to protect their peace. If he let Daegun's betrayal slide, every other crew in Seoul would test him. But if he went after Daegun now, it would ignite a bloodbath that could last months. "There's another option," Bracy said slowly. He looked at her, waiting. "You don't kill him. You destroy his reputation." She stood, wrapped the sheet around herself, brain already working through angles. "Think about it. He attacked you, lost badly, then immediately broke his surrender and tried to steal from you anyway. He looks weak and untrustworthy. You spread that story through every syndicate contact you have. Make him untouchable. No crew will work with him, no suppliers will sell to him, no safe houses will harbor him. He'll be exiled without you firing a single shot." Hyun-woo studied her, and she watched understanding dawn in his eyes. Social execution. Exactly. More effective than a bullet, less messy, and it shows every other boss in this city that you're smart enough to win without constant violence. She crossed to him, placed her hand over his heart. "You're not just muscle, Hyun-woo. You're strategy. Prove it." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he picked up his phone and made 3 calls, one to his intelligence network, one to his harbor contacts, one to his media connections. Each conversation was brief, precise, planting seeds that would bloom into Dae-gun's ruin. When he finished, he pulled Bracy close. "You're scary when you think like this." "I learned from the best," she countered. "A certain ruthless Korean crime boss taught me that power isn't about force, it's about knowing which move to make when. Remind me never to underestimate you." Too late for that. They returned to bed as dawn painted the sky purple and gold, and this time when they slept, it was dreamless and deep. By noon, the word was out. Dae-gun's betrayal spread through Seoul's underworld like wildfire. Crews that had been neutral turned hostile. Suppliers cut ties. Safe houses refused entry. Within 24 hours, he was radioactive. A man without allies, without resources, without future. 3 days later, he left South Korea entirely, fleeing to Thailand with the handful of loyalists he had left. Hyunwoo never had to fire a single shot. "You know what this means," Ye-jun said, meeting with them in the penthouse later that week. He looked between Hyunwoo and Bracy with something like respect. "You two working together like this, strategy and execution, brain and muscle. You're not just partners, you're a dynasty." Bracy felt the weight of that word. Dynasty. Empire. Legacy. 6 months ago, she was nobody, running from violence with $47 and a duffel bag. Now she was sitting in on syndicate strategy meetings, offering insights that shaped Seoul's criminal landscape. The transformation was complete, but as Bracy looked at Hyunwoo across the table, this dangerous, brilliant man who'd somehow become her everything, she realized the real transformation wasn't external, it was internal. She'd stopped seeing herself as a victim, started seeing herself as a survivor who'd learned to thrive. "So what's next?" she asked. Hyunwoo's smile was sharp, predatory, full of promise. "Next, we consolidate. Dae-gun's territory is unclaimed. We take it, expand the syndicate's reach, establish ourselves as the undisputed power in Seoul. And after that, his hand found hers across the table, fingers lacing. After that, we build something that lasts, something worthy of everything we've survived to get here." Ye-jun stood, recognizing his dismissal. At the door, he paused. "For what it's worth, boss, she's good for you. Makes you think before you shoot. That's going to keep us all alive longer." When they were alone, Bracy moved to the window, looking out at the city that had become hers as much as his. Below, millions of people lived their ordinary lives, unaware of the hidden world that shaped their reality. Hyunwoo joined her, arms sliding around her waist from behind. "Having second thoughts?" "Not even first thoughts," she said. "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, with a criminal, with the man I love." She turned in his arms. "There's a difference." His kiss was answer and question and promise all at once. That night they made plans, not just for the syndicate's expansion, but for their own future. Where they'd travel once things stabilized. She'd never been to Europe. He'd promised her Paris. What they'd do with the money they were accumulating. She wanted to set up a scholarship fund for girls from neighborhoods like Inglewood. How they'd navigate the constant danger of his world while building something resembling a life. It was strange, planning a future with someone whose profession involved violence and crime. But it was also the most honest thing Bracy had ever done, acknowledging reality instead of pretending it was something else. "Question," Hyunwoo said as they lay in bed later. "If you could go back 6 months, knowing everything you know now, would you still walk into my club that night?" Bracy didn't hesitate. "Yes, because running from Vernon taught me that hiding doesn't save you. Fighting back does. And you taught me how to fight back smart. Even if it means this life, the danger, the moral ambiguity, the constant looking over our shoulders, especially because of that." She propped herself up on one elbow, looking down at him. "You're the most extraordinary person I've ever met." "Then we're even," she whispered, "because you're the first person who ever made me feel like I was worth protecting." They made love again, slower this time, savoring each touch, each whispered word, storing up this moment against whatever future challenges awaited, because they both knew this peace was temporary. In their world, it always was. 2 weeks after Dae-gun's exile, Bracy learned that peace in the underworld was always an illusion. She was in Hyun-woo's home office, formerly off-limits, now her space as much as his, reviewing quarterly reports from their various enterprises when Yi-jun burst through the door without knocking. That alone told her everything. "We've got a situation," he said, face grim. "Warehouse district, now." Hyun-woo was out of his chair instantly. What kind of situation? The kind where your enemies learned from Daegun's mistakes. 20 minutes later, they were in an armored SUV racing through Seoul's industrial outskirts, Yi-jun briefing them on the situation. Apparently, while everyone had been focused on Daegun's territory grab, 3 smaller crews had formed a coalition: Lim's gang from Itaewon, Park's operation from Gangbuk, and Chen's smuggling ring from the port. Together, they weren't small anymore. "They've taken the primary distribution warehouse," Yi-jun explained, showing surveillance footage on his tablet. 12 of our men as hostages, 20 million in product locked inside, and they're demanding you meet with them for negotiations. Bracy studied the footage. The warehouse was massive, 80,000 square feet of product storage and processing. Losing it would hurt the syndicate's operations significantly. But more than that, letting this coalition get away with such a bold move would make Hyun-woo look weak. "It's a trap," she said flatly. "They don't want to negotiate. They want you to walk in so they can execute you publicly. Send a message that the Tae Syndicate can be challenged." Hyun-woo's jaw worked. "They have my men, and they're counting on you prioritizing those 12 lives over strategic thinking." She met his eyes. "Which is exactly why we can't do what they expect. So what do you suggest?" Bracy pulled up a map of the warehouse district on the tablet, her mind already working through scenarios. This was what she'd become good at: seeing patterns, finding weaknesses, thinking like both predator and prey. "How many men do we have available right now?" she asked Ye-jun. 40, maybe 45 if we pull everyone in. Not enough for a frontal assault without heavy casualties. She zoomed in on the warehouse layout. But look at the positioning. They've fortified the main entrances, put snipers on the roof, control all the obvious approaches. "That's why it's a trap," Hyun-woo said. "That's why it's predictable." Bracy tapped a section of the map. "They're so focused on stopping you from getting in that they haven't thought about what happens if you get under." Both men leaned closer. "The warehouse district was built on Old Seoul," she continued, pulling up infrastructure blueprints she'd studied weeks ago when analyzing the syndicate's assets. "There's a whole network of maintenance tunnels and storm drains running underneath. Most are sealed now, but I'd bet everything that at least 2 or 3 still connect to basement access points in that warehouse." Ye-jun's eyes widened. "A breach from below while they're watching above?" "Exactly." Bracy sketched out the approach quickly. "We send a small, visible force to the front, make it look like you're considering their terms, buying time. Meanwhile, your main team infiltrates through the tunnels, comes up inside their perimeter, and takes out their command structure before they know what's happening." Hyun-woo was quiet, studying the plan. "It's risky. If those tunnels are blocked or collapsed, then we adjust, but I don't think they are. The city uses them for maintenance access. I saw a crew down there last month when we drove past." She looked at him steadily. "Trust me." Those 2 words carried weight. Trust was the foundation they'd built everything on. Her trusting that he wouldn't become Vernon, him trusting that she wouldn't become Yuna. "I trust you," he said simply. Then to Ye-jun, "Get reconnaissance on those tunnels. I want confirmation in 30 minutes. They spent those 30 minutes in tense preparation. Ye-jun confirmed 3 viable tunnel routes, 2 blocked by debris, 1 clear. Hyun-woo assembled his team, splitting them into the visible negotiation group and the underground infiltration squad. Bracy insisted on going with the infiltration team. "Absolutely not," Hyun-woo said immediately. "You need someone who thinks differently than your soldiers, someone who can adapt if the plan goes sideways. That's me." They argued for 5 minutes, him protective, her insistent, until she played her trump card. "You said I was your strength, not your weakness. Prove you meant it." He relented with visible reluctance, outfitting her with body armor and communications gear. "You stay with me at all times. No heroics. Deal. The tunnel was exactly as disgusting as Bracy had imagined. Narrow, damp, smelling of mold and decay. The infiltration team moved in single file, night vision goggles turning the darkness into ghostly green. Water dripped from above, rats scattered at their approach. Bracy focused on her breathing, on placing each foot carefully, on not thinking about the tons of earth and concrete above them. This was so far removed from anything she'd imagined doing with her life that it would have been funny if it wasn't so deadly serious. Coming up on the access point, Yejun said from the front. Sealed door, but the lock looks manageable. What followed was 5 minutes of careful, nearly silent work as their tech specialist picked the lock mechanism. Every second felt like an hour. Above them, through layers of concrete and steel, the coalition thought they had all the advantages. They were about to learn otherwise. The door opened with a whisper of rusted hinges. Beyond it, a basement storage area, dimly lit, filled with industrial shelving and crates, empty of people. Hyun Woo's team flowed through like water, spreading out, checking angles, moving with the efficiency of men who'd done this 100 times. Bracy stayed close to Hyun Woo, her hand on her Glock, heart hammering but mind clear. They ascended through the basement levels, taking out 2 guards silently. Yejun's knife work was brutal and efficient. By the time they reached the ground floor, they'd eliminated 5 of the coalition's men without a single shot fired. The hostages were being held in the central processing area. Bracy could see them through a window. 12 men zip-tied and kneeling, surrounded by coalition soldiers with weapons. Lim himself stood in the center, a fat man in an expensive suit, checking his watch impatiently. Where is Tae? He should have been here by now. He's not coming, Bracy whispered, and Hyun Woo squeezed her hand once. Acknowledgement, agreement, partnership. On my mark, Hyun Woo said into his comms. 3, 2, 1. The ground floor erupted into controlled chaos. Hyun Woo's team burst from multiple access points simultaneously. Side doors, service entrances, the basement stairs. The coalition, focused entirely on defending against an external attack, was completely unprepared for an internal assault. It was over in 90 seconds. Half the coalition forces surrendered immediately. The other half tried to fight and were cut down with ruthless precision. Lim himself grabbed a hostage, pressed a gun to the man's head, screaming about negotiations. Bracy saw the calculation in Hyun Woo's eyes, assessing angles, risk, probability of civilian death, saw him hesitate for the first time ever, so she acted. Lim, she called out, stepping into view. Every gun in the room swiveled toward her, but she kept her hands visible, her voice steady. You wanted to negotiate with Tae? Here I am. I speak for him. Hyun Woo's sharp inhale told her he understood what she was doing, drawing Lim's attention, giving his snipers time to position. You? Lim laughed, cruel and disbelieving. You're just his whore. I'm his partner, Bracy corrected calmly, which means I'm also your death if you don't drop that weapon in the next 5 seconds. You think I'm afraid of... The shot came from above, Yejun on the second-floor walkway, firing through a gap in Lim's positioning. The bullet hit his shoulder, spinning him away from the hostage. The man scrambled free. 2 more of Hyun Woo's men secured Lim before he could even process what had happened. Silence descended, broken only by Lim's whimpering and the shuffle of zip ties being cut from hostages. Hyun Woo approached Lim slowly, each step deliberate. When he spoke, his voice carried through the entire warehouse. You made 3 mistakes. First, you thought hostages would stop me. Second, you thought attacking from outside was my only option. Third, his gaze flicked to Bracy with unmistakable pride. You underestimated the woman beside me. He crouched to Lim's level. I'm going to let you live, not because you deserve it, but because I want you to spread a message. The Tae Syndicate doesn't negotiate with people who take what's ours. We don't meet threats with compromise. We meet them with strategy, overwhelming force, and absolute victory. Tell everyone who listen what happened here today. Lim nodded frantically, blood seeping through his fingers where he clutched his shoulder. Get him out of here, Hyun Woo ordered. Make sure every crew in Seoul knows the coalition failed. As Lim was dragged away, Bracy felt the adrenaline finally catch up to her. Her hands trembled slightly. She'd just stepped into a hostage situation, used herself as bait, trusted that Hyun-woo's team would protect her. The risk had been enormous. The trust required had been absolute. Hyun-woo was beside her instantly, hands framing her face. What were you thinking? That he needed a distraction and I could provide one. She managed a shaky smile. Did it work? Too well. He pulled her against his chest, arms tight around her. Don't ever scare me like that again. Can't promise that. This is our life now. He laughed, despite himself, the sound vibrating through his chest into hers. Impossible woman. Your impossible woman, she corrected. Mine, he agreed, and kissed her there in the middle of the warehouse, surrounded by his men and evidence of their victory, claiming her as surely as any vow. Later, back at the penthouse, Yejun gave his assessment. The coalition's finished. Park and Chen fled the city the moment they heard what happened. The smaller crews are falling in line. Seoul's stabilizing under Tae control. Because of her plan, Hyun-woo said, hand on Bracey's shoulder. Yejun nodded. Because of her plan. Ma'am, you've got instincts that would have made you a hell of a field commander. I'll stick to strategy, thanks, Bracey said dryly. I prefer winning without getting shot at. After Yejun left, she and Hyun-woo stood at their window, watching the city lights flicker like stars brought to earth. You know what today proved? Hyun-woo said quietly. That I'm reckless? That you're fearless. He turned her to face him. 6 months ago, you walked into my world curious and bold. Today, you shaped that world with your intelligence and courage. You're not just standing in my empire anymore, Bracey. You're building it with me. The words settled into her like roots, grounding her to this moment, this man, this impossible life they'd created together. Then let's make sure it's worth everything we've risked. It already is, because it's ours. They made love that night with a new intensity. Victory sex mixed with relief, triumph mixed with the knowledge that they'd survived another battle together. When Bracey finally fell asleep, curled against Hyun-woo's side, she dreamed not of Chicago or Vernon or the violence she'd witnessed, but of the future they were building brick by brick, decision by decision. A future where she was no longer running, no longer small, no longer afraid. A future where she stood tall beside the most dangerous man in Seoul and called it home. 3 months after the warehouse siege, Bracey stood on the rooftop of Hyun-woo's penthouse building, looking out over Seoul's glittering nightscape. The city had become hers in ways she never anticipated, not through ownership, but through understanding. She knew its rhythms now, its hidden currents, the way power flowed through streets and shadows like electricity through circuits. Behind her, a party was in full swing. Hyun-woo was hosting the annual syndicate gathering. Every crew leader, every lieutenant, every person who mattered in Seoul's underworld, all assembled to pledge loyalty and discuss the year ahead. It was equal parts business meeting and display of strength, and for the first time in the Tae Syndicate's history, a woman stood at the boss's side as his equal partner. The transformation had been gradual, but undeniable. Over 3 months, Bracey had proven herself not just as Hyun-woo's romantic partner, but as a strategic asset. Her background, surviving Inglewood, escaping Vernon, adapting to situations, had given her a unique perspective that the syndicate's men, raised in traditional organized crime, often lacked. She thought differently, saw angles they missed, and most importantly, she wasn't afraid to speak up when she disagreed with Hyun-woo's plans. That last part had earned his deepest respect. Hiding? Yejun's voice came from behind her. She turned, smiling. Breathing. It's intense in there. You're handling it better than most would. He joined her at the railing, looking out at the city. You know they call you Tae's Queen now. I heard. Not sure how I feel about that. They mean it respectfully. You've earned it. Yejun glanced at her. The warehouse plan, the Daegun strategy, the way you've helped restructure our distribution networks. You're not just the boss's girlfriend. You're leadership. The word sat heavy and strange. Leadership. Her. a girl from Chicago who'd spent years being told she was worthless by a man who used fists to punctuate his opinions. "Does it bother you?" she asked. "Taking orders from someone like me? Someone smart, capable, and willing to put herself at risk for the syndicate?" Yejun shook his head. "No. What would bother me is taking orders from someone who thought their position entitled them to respect without earning it. You earn it every day." The conversation was interrupted by Hyun-woo appearing through the rooftop access door. He'd shed his jacket, his shirt sleeves rolled up, looking more relaxed than he had all evening. When his eyes found Bracy, something in his expression softened. "Stealing my partner?" he asked Yejun with mock severity. "Just keeping her company while you glad-hand politicians. I'll leave you to it." He headed back inside, leaving them alone under the stars. Hyun-woo crossed to Bracy, arms sliding around her waist from behind, chin resting on her shoulder. "Tired?" "A little, but good tired." She leaned back against him. "Your world is exhausting." "Our world," he corrected. "And yes, it is." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the city breathe below them. Then Bracy spoke quietly, voicing something that had been building in her mind for weeks. "I've been thinking about Chicago." Hyun-woo tensed slightly. "What about it?" "About going back, just for a visit." She turned in his arms to face him. "I left so fast, running from Vernon, that I never properly said goodbye to people. My old neighbor, Mrs. Chen, who used to feed me when money was tight, the librarian at the branch near my apartment who saved books for me, my sister's kids who probably don't even remember Aunt Bracy anymore." "You want closure," he said, understanding immediately. "And I want them to see what I've become." She touched his chest, feeling his heartbeat. Not the scared woman who ran away, but the woman who found her strength. "I need them to know I'm okay, better than okay." Hyun-woo was quiet for a long moment, considering. She knew what he was calculating: the risk of returning to U.S. soil, the potential for law enforcement attention, the logistics of keeping her safe in a city where his power didn't reach the way it did in Seoul. Finally, he nodded. "Then we'll go, together. I'll arrange security, keep it quiet, make sure nothing and no one can touch you there. You don't have to come with me." "Yes, I do." His hands framed her face. "Everywhere you go, I go. That's the deal. Besides," a slight smile, "I'm curious to see where you came from, the neighborhood that made you who you are." Bracy felt emotion swell in her chest. "Thank you." "For what?" "For letting me have both worlds. For not making me choose between who I was and who I am now." His kiss was tender, reverent. "You never have to choose. You're all of it. Chicago and Seoul, survivor and strategist, the woman who ran and the woman who stands and fights. All of it makes you perfect." They returned to the party hand in hand, and Bracy felt the weight of dozens of eyes tracking their movement. These men, hardened criminals who'd seen everything, watched her with something like awe. Not because she was beautiful or because she'd landed the city's most powerful crime lord, but because she'd proven herself useful, smart, and unbreakable. In their world, those qualities mattered more than anything else. The party wound down around midnight. Crew leaders departed with pledges of loyalty, alliances were solidified over expensive liquor, and plans were made for the syndicate's continued expansion. By 1 a.m., only Hyun-woo's inner circle remained, Yejun and 4 other lieutenants